Cold Billionaire walked in and found one nanny playing with his adult son. What he saw next stopped his heart. Felix Adami was known as a cold man, not cruel, not loud, just cold. People in Lagos whispered his name with respect and fear. He was one of Africa's most powerful billionaires. Tall buildings, tech companies, banks, his signature was everywhere. But inside his massive mansion, Felix Adami lived like a stranger. That evening, Felix returned home earlier than usual. No calls, no meetings, no security announcement. He didn't plan it. He just felt tired in a way money couldn't fix. As he pushed open the heavy wooden door, he expected silence. That deep, empty silence that had filled his house for years. But then he heard something strange. Laughter. Felix stopped walking, his heart skipped. Not children's laughter, not visitors, it was his son's laughter. That was impossible. His son, Ethan Adami, had not laughed in years. Ethan was 25 years old, but emotionally, he lived in a world of his own. After a tragic accident years ago, Ethan had withdrawn completely. He barely spoke. He avoided eye contact. Doctors called it trauma. Some said it was permanent. Felix had tried everything. Best doctors from America, private therapists, expensive care centers. Nothing worked. Eventually, Felix stopped trying. He provided food, shelter, money, but not warmth. Felix followed the sound slowly, his shoes quiet against the marble floor. The laughter grew louder. When he reached the living room door, he froze. What he saw didn't make sense. On the carpet sat Mary Johnson, the new nanny, young, simple, calm. She was sitting on the floor. And across from her was Ethan, his adult son. Ethan was clapping his hands, smiling. Mary was rolling a soft ball toward him, laughing gently, not loudly, not forcing joy. Just being present, Ethan rolled the ball back. Then he laughed again, a real laugh. Felix felt his chest tighten. For years, Ethan barely responded to anyone, not even him. And now this nanny had done what he couldn't. Felix's anger from the office vanished. In its place came confusion and something else, jealousy. Mary looked up and noticed Felix standing there. Her smile disappeared. She stood up quickly. I'm sorry, sir, she said softly. I didn't mean to." Felix raised his hand. "Stop," he said quietly. Ethan looked up too. He saw his father. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't look away. Felix couldn't speak. He just watched. The room felt different, warmer, alive. Mary lowered her eyes, scared she had crossed a line. "I was just playing," she said. "He likes the ball." Felix swallowed hard. Ethan reached for the ball again and gently pushed it toward Mary. That small action hit Felix harder than any business loss ever had. His son was choosing connection. Felix turned and walked away without another word. That night, Felix couldn't sleep. One question kept echoing in his mind. Who is this woman, and how did she reach my son when I failed? Felix Adami thought Mary was just a nanny. But the next morning, he would discover a truth about her past, a truth that would change everything. Who Mary really is and why she understands Ethan's pain so deeply. Felix Adami woke before sunrise. That never happened. For years, alarms had ruled his life. Schedules, meetings, deadlines. But this morning, his mind pulled him awake on its own. Because of Mary, and because of Ethan's laughter, a sound he thought he would never hear again. Felix sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. These hands had signed billion-dollar deals. These hands had built empires, yet they had failed at the one job that mattered most. Being a father, downstairs the house was quiet again. Too quiet. Felix dressed simply and walked toward the kitchen. As he passed the living room, he stopped. Ethan was sitting on the couch, alone. No phone, no TV. Just sitting, holding the same soft ball from the night before. That alone was unusual. Felix watched from a distance, afraid that if he spoke, the moment would break. Then Mary entered the room. She moved gently, like someone who didn't want to scare a fragile thing. She didn't rush. She didn't talk loudly. She simply sat on the floor again. "Good morning, Ethan," she said softly. Ethan looked at her and nodded. Felix's breath caught, a nod, something so small yet so huge. Mary rolled the ball again. Ethan rolled it back, slowly. Calmly, Felix cleared his throat. Mary looked up, startled. "Good morning, sir." Felix nodded. "Morning." There was an awkward silence. "I need to speak with you," Felix said. Mary stiffened. "Yes, sir," she replied. Felix glanced at Ethan, who was now focused on the ball again. "Not here," Felix added. "Later." Mary nodded. An hour later, they sat in Felix's private study. The room where no one laughed, the room where decisions were made. Mary sat on the edge of the chair, hands folded, eyes down. Felix studied her. She wasn't what he expected. No expensive clothes. No forced confidence, just calm and kindness. "How long have you worked here?" Felix asked. "3 weeks, sir," Mary answered. Felix leaned back. "In 3 weeks you did what doctors couldn't do in 5 years. Mary swallowed. "I didn't do anything special." Felix raised an eyebrow. "Then explain it." Mary hesitated. Then she spoke. "When I was 12, she said quietly, my younger brother stopped speaking." Felix's expression softened slightly. "He saw something terrible," Mary continued. "Something no child should see. After that, he closed himself off, just like Ethan." Felix listened. "Everyone tried to fix him," Mary said. "Doctors, teachers, pastors, but nothing worked." "So what did you do?" Felix asked. Mary looked up. "I stopped trying to fix him," she said. Felix frowned. "I sat with him," Mary explained. "I played, I waited, I listened even when he didn't speak." Felix felt a lump in his throat. "People think adults like Ethan don't need play," Mary said, "but play is how the heart feels safe again." Felix was silent. "Your son is not broken," Mary added gently. "He's just guarding himself." The words hit Felix hard. For years, he had treated Ethan like a problem to solve, not a person to love. Felix stood up and walked toward the window. "Why didn't you tell anyone this?" he asked. Mary smiled sadly. "No one asked." Felix turned back. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. Mary nodded. "Yes, sir, you're Mr. Adami." "And yet," Felix said, "you treated my son like a human being, not a burden." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "He deserves that." Felix felt something inside him crack. That afternoon, Felix canceled all his meetings, for the first time in years. He sat in the living room watching Mary and Ethan play quietly, watching his son smile, watching a stranger succeed where he had failed. And a thought crept into Felix's mind, one that scared him more than any business risk. What if Mary mattered more to Ethan than his own father? Felix thought he had found the answer. But that night, he would overhear a conversation, one that would make him question Mary's true intentions and force him to choose between control and compassion. How trust begins to break and how love is put to the test. That night, Felix Adami sat alone in his study. The house was quiet again, too quiet. He held a glass of water in his hand but hadn't taken a single sip. His mind was not on business, not on money, not on the world outside. It was on Mary and on Ethan. For the first time in many years, Felix felt something close to hope. But hope scared him, because hope meant he had something to lose. Felix stood up and walked slowly through the hallway. He wanted to see Ethan again before going to bed, just to be sure the smiles from earlier were real, not something his tired mind had imagined. As he passed near the guest corridor, he heard voices. Mary's voice, she was on the phone. Felix stopped. He didn't mean to listen, but then he heard his son's name. "Yes," Mary said quietly, "he's very gentle. He understands more than people think." Felix's chest tightened. She continued, unaware of his presence. "No, I won't stay forever," Mary said. "I know my place." Felix's heart dropped. Stay forever. Place, his mind raced. Was she planning to leave? Or worse, was she planning something else? Mary's voice softened. "I only want what's best for him," she said. "Even if that means I step away." Felix felt confused, then angry. He stepped back before she could see him and returned to his study, his thoughts spinning. For years, Felix trusted no one easily. That was how he survived in business. Trust was earned slowly. Suspicion kept him alive. And now, this woman had entered his home, his son's heart, his fragile world. What if she was pretending? What if this was all an act? Felix sat down heavily. He remembered how quickly Ethan had connected with her. Too quickly. Felix clenched his jaw. That night, he made a decision. He would test Mary. Just like he tested people in business. The next morning, Felix called Mary into his study. Mary entered calmly, unaware of the storm behind his eyes. "Yes, sir," she asked. Felix folded his hands. "I've noticed changes in my son," he said. Mary nodded. "Yes." "Too many changes," Felix said coldly. Mary stiffened. Felix continued, his voice sharp. "I want you to stop playing with him the way you do." Mary's eyes widened. "Sir." "No games, no sitting on the floor, no distractions," Felix said. "He needs discipline." Mary swallowed hard. "But sir," she said carefully, "that will hurt him." Felix stood up. "You are not his parent," he said firmly. "I am." The words stung Mary like a slap. She lowered her head. "Yes, sir." Felix watched her leave. His chest felt heavy. He told himself this was necessary. If she truly cared, he thought, she would respect my rules. That afternoon, Felix watched from the stairs. Mary sat on the couch this time, not on the floor. Ethan stood nearby, holding the ball. He looked confused. He rolled the ball toward Mary. Mary didn't move. Her hands trembled in her lap. Ethan frowned. He rolled it again, still nothing. Slowly, Ethan's smile faded. He backed away. Felix felt something twist painfully inside him. Ethan retreated to his corner, silent again. Felix's heart pounded. What have I done? Later that evening, Felix found Mary in the kitchen, quietly wiping tears from her face. Why didn't you play with him? Felix asked. Mary looked up, eyes red. You asked me not to, she said simply. Felix opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he saw the truth. Mary wasn't trying to control Ethan, she was protecting him. Felix turned away. That night, Ethan refused dinner. He sat in silence, no smile, no laughter. Felix lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. He finally understood something painful. Money had never healed his son. Control had never healed his son, but kindness had. And he had just pushed it away. Felix thought he had lost everything again. But the next morning, Ethan would do something so unexpected. It would force Felix to face a truth he had avoided his whole life. The moment that changes Felix forever, and the choice he can no longer escape. The morning sun slipped quietly through the tall windows of Felix Adami's mansion. But inside, the house felt darker than ever. Felix sat at the dining table alone. His breakfast lay untouched. Across the room, Ethan sat in his usual corner, knees pulled close to his chest, eyes fixed on the floor. No ball, no smile, no sound. Felix watched his son carefully. This was the Ethan he knew too well, the Ethan who existed before Mary arrived. And now, because of him, Ethan was back there again. Felix stood up slowly and walked toward his son. Ethan, he said softly, no response. Felix crouched down in front of him. He had done this many times before, but today felt different. Today, his chest felt tight with regret. I'm here, Felix said, still nothing. Felix closed his eyes for a moment. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the weight of his mistakes, not as a billionaire, but as a father. At that exact moment, soft footsteps echoed behind him. Mary had entered the room quietly. She froze when she saw Felix kneeling in front of Ethan. I'm sorry, sir, she said gently. I'll leave. No, Felix said quickly. Mary stopped. Felix stood up and turned toward her. His voice was no longer cold. I need you, he said. Mary looked confused. Sir, Felix took a deep breath. This was not easy for him. I was wrong, he said. The words felt heavy but freeing. Mary's eyes widened. I thought control would protect my son, Felix continued. But all it did was push him further away. Mary said nothing. Felix walked toward Ethan again and picked up the soft ball from the floor. He held it in his hand, unsure what to do. Then he looked at Mary. Can you show me? He asked quietly. Mary's lips trembled. Of course. She knelt beside Ethan and Felix, slowly, carefully, like before. She rolled the ball gently toward Ethan. Ethan looked at the ball, then at Mary. Then something incredible happened. Ethan picked up the ball. But instead of rolling it back to Mary, he rolled it to Felix. Felix froze, his breath caught in his throat. Ethan looked at him, right at him. It was the first time in years. Felix's hands shook as he rolled the ball back. Ethan smiled. Not a big smile, but a real one. Tears filled Felix's eyes. Mary covered her mouth quietly, overwhelmed. That small moment shattered every wall Felix had built. For years, he believed being strong meant being distant. Now he understood. Being strong meant being present. Later that day, Felix called Mary into his study again. This time, his tone was different. I owe you an apology, Felix said. Mary shook her head. You're his father. Felix smiled sadly. I forgot how to be one. He paused. Mary, he said, why did you really come here? Mary hesitated. Then she spoke honestly. When my brother never recovered, she said softly, my family broke apart. I promised myself that if I ever met someone like him again, I wouldn't walk away. Felix felt his heart ache. You don't see Ethan as a job, Felix said. Mary nodded. I see him as a person. Felix stood up. You are no longer just a nanny, he said. Mary's eyes widened. I want you to stay, Felix continued. Not because I pay you, but because my son needs you. Mary whispered. I'll stay if you promise to be there too. Felix nodded. I promise. That evening, Felix canceled another full day of meetings. Instead, he sat on the living room floor with his son. With Mary, they rolled the ball, they laughed softly. For the first time, Felix felt like a home was being rebuilt. But just when peace began to settle, a phone call came. Felix answered. His face changed. Slowly, he looked at Mary and then at Ethan. The voice on the phone had delivered news that could destroy everything again. Felix thought the hardest part was learning how to love. But the truth he just heard on the phone would force him to choose between his empire and his son's happiness. To witness the decision that shocks everyone and the kindness that changes all their lives forever. Felix Adami stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear. The voice on the other end repeated the words slowly, carefully, as if speaking to a child. Mr. Adami, the board has voted. They believe your personal involvement with your son is affecting your leadership. They want you to step back or step down. The call ended. Felix lowered the phone. For a moment, the room felt unreal. Across the living room, Ethan sat on the floor, gently rolling the ball back and forth with Mary. His face was calm, peaceful, safe. Felix had waited years to see that look, and now it was being threatened. Felix walked to the window and stared outside at the city he had built, tall buildings, bright lights. Power and respect, everything he once thought defined him. Mary stood quietly behind him. You don't have to explain, she said softly. I can leave if, Felix turned sharply. No, the word came out stronger than he intended. Mary stopped. Felix took a deep breath. For years, he said slowly, I chose business first every time. He looked at Ethan again. And every time I lost him. Felix walked back into the room and knelt beside his son. Ethan, he said gently. Ethan looked up. Felix held the ball out to him. I'm here, Felix said. And I'm not leaving. Ethan hesitated, then smiled. That was the moment Felix decided. The next morning, headlines exploded. African billionaire SDPS down as CEO, FELIXADYMI chooses family over empire. People were shocked. Business partners called him foolish. Investors panicked. Friends questioned his sanity. Felix ignored them all. At a press conference, he stood calmly before microphones. I built companies, he said, but I forgot to build a relationship with my son. Cameras flashed. I am not retiring from life, Felix continued. I am returning to it. The world watched in silence. Weeks passed. Felix spent his days at home, simple days. He ate breakfast with Ethan. He played on the floor. He listened. Mary stayed not as a nanny but as family. One afternoon, Felix watched Ethan paint quietly. Father, Ethan said suddenly. Felix froze. Yes, he whispered. Ethan looked up. Thank you for staying. Felix broke down. He held his son tightly, tears flowing freely. In that moment, Felix understood something no amount of money had ever taught him. Success is meaningless if you're not present to share it. Months later, Felix restructured his empire. Not to chase profit, but to support families like his. Care centers, trauma support programs, safe spaces for adults who were never allowed to heal. Mary helped lead them. Not because of her position, but because of her heart. One evening, Felix sat with Mary on the porch as Ethan laughed inside. You changed my life, Felix said. Mary smiled gently. No, she replied. You chose to change, Felix nodded. For the first time in his life, the cold billionaire felt warm. Not because he owned the world, but because he finally belonged to someone. He walked in as a cold billionaire. He knelt down as a father. And he rose again as a human being. Because sometimes the greatest kindness is choosing love over power.